So when I left you off, guys, on Monday, first of all, happy birthday.
I blame it on guys.
When I left you off on Monday, how was the war going?
South.
Yeah. The war wasn't going south. That would have been better for us because the south. Never mind. So yeah, the war was not going well. How was society reacting to the war? Yeah, public opinion is dropping. Like I said, our culture, our society, we're falling into a period of upheaval and chaos, and all of that's going to be reflected in the election of 1968. So the election of 1968 is, in my opinion, the perfect exclamation point to a crazy year. To a crazy, crazy year. What are some of the events that help us understand the craziness of 1968? First is the Tet Offensive. Right? The Tet Offensive and the My Lai Massacre are telling us, like, Vietnam is not going the way we think it's going. Right? If we're this close to winning the war, what did General William Westmoreland say in 1968? What? There's light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost there, guys. Just give it a little more time. We're going to win this war. And then, boom, Tet Offensive. We're not winning this war. The My Lai Massacre comes out, which makes America just look terrible. We're doing these villagers. Public opinion is plummeting. Right? I showed you guys the data overnight. We go from a 60% approval rating to a 40% approval rating, which is a crazy shift to happen that quickly. I just heard MLK is assassinated. What else happens in 1968? Johnson says, I'm not running for president again. RFK is then assassinated. Oh my God. College protests. Columbia University is shut down. And after all of that, we have this election that reflects the chaos. It reflects the chaos. This election map tells us a lot. Every election map tells us a lot. This election map tells us a lot as we see, for the first time in a long time, Democrats aren't winning the South. Now, what is this group in society? I want you to just bear with me for a hot second because it's going to make the party situation make a little more sense. Because it's going to give us, as of tomorrow, our final party system. It'll say on the slide, 1968 to today, which means we're just that close to done. What is the group in politics that has been pushing back on FDR's New Deal? Pushing back on Truman's Fair Deal? Pushing back on Kennedy's attempts to integrate things? Pushing back on LBJ's civil rights movement? Who is the group in politics who's been pushing back on these examples of progress? Be more specific. Southern Democrats. The Dixiecrats, sure, but more broadly, because we wouldn't call them that in the 1930s. More broadly speaking, these Southern Democrats, right? So it's not that, and keeping this in mind, when do the Democrats begin to embrace this idea of liberalism, of using the government for progress? When is it that the Democrats, after that, because that's kind of Republicans and Democrats, when is it the Democrats begin starting to embrace using more government for progress? After that. The New Deal. But it's the New Deal when the Democrats become the party of more government, more progress, more programs, more support, more help. Right? Then we see the New Deal. We see Truman's Fair Deal trying to give nationwide health insurance, for example. That gets stopped by Southern Democrats. Kennedy's attempt to force civil rights, stopped by Southern, worried about Southern Democrats, worried about Southern Democrats, worried about Southern Democrats. LBJ says, in 1965, after pushing for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, he is a Southern Democrat. He says, I just lost the South for Democrats for a generation. I just lost the South for the Democratic Party for a generation. Was he right? Yeah. Wrong. He lost the South for Democrats from then till now. So the South has always voted Democrat, 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 Democrat. Boom, 1968, no mas. That means no more, Elliot. So it's important that we figure out, because this election map shows us a huge shift. And these Southern Democrats, who are they voting for? They're voting for our friend George Wallace, the racist goat. Segregation today. Segregation tomorrow. Segregation forever. Hey, everyone freaks out. I stand here before you where once Jefferson Davis stood. Don't worry, after this, during this election, right after, Wallace will have an assassination attempt on his body. He will be shot. He will be paralyzed. And then he basically disappears from public life. So, these Southern Democrats who vote for Wallace, though, keep in mind, they don't leave the Democrats and become Republicans, do they? They leave the Democrat Party and they vote for the American independent segregationist policies of George Wallace. And they would tell you that they did not leave the Democratic Party. They didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left them. The Democratic Party left them by embracing liberalism, by embracing government support, by embracing big government, by embracing a loose interpretation of the Constitution, by embracing progress. And then finally, the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, the Hartford Convention, if you will, was embracing civil rights. So these Southern white Democrats vote for George Wallace. Nixon wins much of the rest of the country. Democrats win the white working class votes like they have. Absolutely. You're good. Grab a seat. Whose signature is this? Nice. Democrats win their traditional voting base. Republicans win their traditional voting base. And Nixon wins the presidency in 1968. And we issue in this new era of the Vietnam War. Now Nixon promises, and we should be at the 1968 election right there. We should be. Good. So Nixon's policy on Vietnam, he promises in his campaign he has some sort of secret strategy. He says, don't worry guys, I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's a secret, but I got a good strategy on Vietnam. Elect me and I'll get us out of Vietnam. I'll take care of it. He takes the presidency and he promises this idea of peace with honor. Peace with honor. Does that sound like we're going to win the war? No. He's like, we're not going to win this war, but damn it, we're not going to lose. We're going to have peace with honor. Now his big appeal, and I want you to dial in on this phrase. His big appeal is he says, the silent majority supports me. I have the support, I have the appeal, I have the backing in America of the silent majority. Take a minute on that phrase. What is Nixon trying to appeal to? Who is Nixon's in-group? And who is he trying to ostracize as his out-group, psychologically speaking? Take a minute to talk about this phrase, the silent majority. Go for it. Go for it.
Silent majority. Guess I'll be like the
Birthday boy.
Nobody was saying
Is silent majority. We're super important. We're here.
pretty sure they're like they want to
Very important.
we have to win this war or we have to
We'll talk about war tomorrow.
President Ford used to be a model.
Right. Jimmy Carter. So, this silent majority, what's the key word there?
silent.
Silent. What is Nixon trying to say? Talk to me.
What I took from it is that I believe that he's saying that he has the support of Southern Democrats who are supposedly being oppressed by all these
Kind of, but not really. What's the opposite of silent? Loud. Loud. Boisterous. Who's been loud in society in the last 10 years? Protesters. Who else? What are the groups that have been loud? Civil rights activists. Students. Urban areas. Black people. Young people. Progressive white people who are pushing for change as well. So this appeal is a really sneaky way of saying that we are the normal people. We're the everyday Americans. You don't see us on TV hooting and hollering, protesting, boycotting, making a scene, causing a fuss. But the everyday American people, they support me, Richard Nixon. Now, his policy for Vietnam is called Vietnamization. He's going to make the Vietnamese fight the Vietnam War. All right, look at LBJs. I talked about the period 1965-66 on Monday. It's called Americanization, as America takes on the bulk of the fighting in Vietnam. And Nixon's saying, look, we'll support you. We'll pay. We'll give you the resources. We'll give you the supplies. We'll give you whatever you need, but you're going to fight your own war. You're going to fight your own war. Now, that's his policy. That's his proposal. That's his goal. What happens instead is quite different. Behind super secret closed doors, we actually expand the conflict under Nixon. We go and use American forces to invade Cambodia. That makes good logical sense. Let's go invade another country. The thinking is that most of the North Vietnamese army is hiding in neighboring Cambodia. So what we need to do is we need to just run over these borders into Cambodia. Who's that going to piss off? Cambodia, right? And Americans who are like, I thought you promised us we're going to get less involved in this war. Now we went and invaded another country? What the hell is going on? We begin bombing the living crap out of neighboring Laos. Laos, not even involved in the war. Laos gets more bombs dropped on it during the Vietnam conflict than Japan in World War II. Laos does. Oh, my bad, Laos. Sorry about that, bro. I missed. You see what happened was I was aiming for Vietnam, and then you're like right there next door. So we just dropped, tens of thousands of pounds on Laos. It wasn't an accident. The thinking is that the North Vietnamese are using Laos as a way into South Vietnam on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, this network of roads and paths to get stuff in. So we're dropping all kinds of Agent Orange and bombs on Laos. We're invading Cambodia, even though Nixon promised that we're going to Vietnamize this war and we're going to take our hands off. And it's under Nixon we see the huge increased use of Agent Orange to defoliize the jungles of Vietnam, and it's a hot mess. So things also ramp up domestically. Turn to your page. Under Nixon's presidency as well, specifically on 2 colleges. So it is this exposure. It's very hard, you're going to learn shortly. It becomes very hard to keep secrets in America in the 1960s and 70s. It becomes very hard to keep secrets. So as soon as America is it easy to invade another country and not have Americans find out? No. Is it easy to bomb another country and have Americans not find out? No. So as soon as the news reports come out that we've invaded Cambodia and we've begun bombing Laos, Americans freak out. Americans absolutely freak out. Specifically, it's the invasion of Cambodia that results in a huge increase in protests. Because we were promised this bill of goods that says we're going to get less involved in Vietnam, and now we're invading other countries. It's 2 colleges that have the most noteworthy protests. The first is Jackson State. Jackson State is in Mississippi. It is a black college, an HBCU. And they are pissed because in general in Vietnam, the people dying in Vietnam are disproportionately people of color and people from lower incomes. Jackson State has a huge protest about this invasion of Cambodia, and the police come and they shoot the protesters. 2 students are killed, 9 students are injured for doing what? For exercising their First Amendment rights and protesting against the government. Killed. Concurrently, so basically at the same time, in Ohio, at Kent State University, a public school in Ohio, the students have a huge protest and they burn down the campus's ROTC building. Anybody know what ROTC is?
Army, like
Reserve Officer Training Corps. It's the way that kids get recruited into the Army from college and train to get a free education, go to college and train for the Army at the same time, basically, to be an officer in the Army. So the kids at the campus looked at this ROTC building as a symbol of the Vietnam War. They protested and they burned it down. Nobody gets hurt, but again, they're destroying property. The governor of Ohio calls them these students worse than Nazis. These student protesters are worse than Nazis, destroying property, burning things down. And if they don't stop, we're going to kick them out of school and arrest them. Is that a way to make student protesters stop? No. What do? They protest more. So after the ROTC building gets burned down, a few weeks later, May 4th of 1970, we have another protest. The governor calls the Ohio National Guard. So the militia for Ohio, basically, to stop this protest. So you have on this college campus, basically a version of the army. Come, they tell the protesters, stop your protest. Go back to your dorms, go back to your classrooms. They don't stop. Some individuals in the National Guard either panic or react in a negative way, and they start shooting the protesters again. 4 students dead and 11 students injured. And now back to back, one in the north, one in the south. One at a black school, one at a more white school. We have student protesters being killed by American authorities for protesting the war. And that just leads to more protest, more protest, more protest. By the end of May of 1970, 400 colleges have been shut down by protesters. Kids, when you guys want something, you guys have a lot of power. 400 colleges in the country have been shut down. And Nixon's response? Well, they should have known better. That's what they get for protesting. That's what they get for rioting. That's what they get for destroying property. Sadly, this silent majority agrees. Most of Nixon's supporters in public opinion polls are like, yeah, that's what the kids get. It's too bad they died, but that's not what they should be doing in society anyway. Protesting, being all loud, causing trouble. So America is becoming increasingly divided over this issue of Vietnam. And Nixon and his policies are actually making it worse. Actually making it worse. Here's a very famous picture from Kent State, which just shows the absolute anguish, because nobody expects going to a protest to get shot by your own government and killed. One of the dead students, the immediate reaction. This picture wins the Pulitzer Prize for photojournalism in 1970. In terms of, it's on the cover of Time magazine. It just really shows the absolute horror on people's faces, where it's like, what the hell just happened? So I have another example of, I think, a good protest song, and it's called Ohio, obviously in reference to Kent State, the shooting of students at Ohio. That's from Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Just listen to the words. The footage, the pictures are good as well on the video. It's a little different than the one you guys heard on Monday in tone and message, but definitely still worth listening to. That sign.
That's pretty good.
I want to support you. Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on our own. This summer you hear the drum beat coming, 4 dead in Ohio. So that line, of course, the 4 dead in Ohio stands out. But that line, we're finally on our own, I think best encapsulates these protest movements, realizing like the government isn't supporting our right to protest, society isn't supporting our message on being anti-war, and now people are dying. It gets a little better. It's a good song too.
Finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. Oh, dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are hunting us down. Should have been done long ago. Wanna be blue and find the dead on the ground. How can you run when you know
down to it, soldiers are gunning us down. It's about as to the point as you can get. Good song. Thoughts? Deep, sure. Sure. Culture's powerful. Culture is I think the expression of culture, how you express culture, can be such a powerful driver of public opinion. How is this song different than what you guys heard on Monday, though? How is the tone, the message, the power of this song different than Fortunate Son from Monday? Thoughts?
More direct.
Sure, it's a little more direct, absolutely. 4 dead in Ohio. Right, soldiers are gunning us down, they're laying dead on the ground. How do you run when you know how it's going to end? How else?
Our own government's against us.
Sure, right? It's a little more like us against the government. How else is this different than the music from Monday, though? What do you guys think?
It's like the tone.
The tone! Talk to me. That's what I'm looking for.
This one's like more like on the sad or like the gloomy part of it.
I think the word I would use for this is somber. Sad, gloomy, it's the somber tone of like acceptance. Of like, yeah, soldiers are gunning us down, and this is just where the world is right now. Whereas the obviously Creedence Clearwater Revival, Fortunate Son is more like this. What's that?
Like crying.
It's like angry, it's aggressive, it's proud of resistance, and now the resistance is just kind of like, damn. So it's important that we understand that like these events on college campuses, like that photo is on everybody's newspapers. Time magazine, right? Winning prize. It really encapsulates what's happening in America here under Nixon's presidency. And it's about to get worse. The year after, the Pentagon Papers begin to get published in the New York Times. Interesting. A former defense analyst, Daniel Ellsberg, he worked for the CIA, for the Department of Defense. He quits his job. And on the way out, he takes with him a copy of all of these documents. Literally thousands of pages of confidential, secret documents about what the government's been doing in Vietnam. And what does he do? He starts leaking them to the New York Times. What does the New York Times do? Begins publishing them. Take a minute and talk to your partner. Is this right? Is this justified? Think about this from Ellsberg's perspective. Think about this from the government's perspective. What do you guys think about this situation of this guy just leaking government documents to the newspaper? 1 minute, go. Yeah, but like, the government hasn't got exactly.
This wouldn't be justified because it was against
Do we have the Constitutional authority to go in Congress and everything for war?
Exactly at the time, it was
Oh, we're here bombing camp.
of like controversy of the Vietnam War. So he wanted to attack, so he justified in the
Which Elliot, I'm going home. All right. Good conversation. What do we think? I would love to hear a volunteer who has an opinion on this issue who's not named Luis Bernal. Kat, speak to me. I know you have an opinion. I'm glad you talked to me.
I feel like it was justified since the people deserve to know what's going on, but at the same time, the way in which he did it, I guess, isn't morally.
Maybe we should call the National Guard and shoot him. Is there, just to play devil's advocate, like these students are protesting the right way. How'd that work out for them? Hey, your opinion's valid though. Talk to me, and then talk to me.
Wouldn't those papers be considered private property to the
Of
government?
who?
The government?
Isn't the government ours?
Oh.
Of the people?
Uh-huh.
By the people? For
the people.
the people? Luis, what is your opinion, sir?
For Tom is that I think.
What if the National Guard ran you over in the chest? What happened?
I told him that I think Ellsworth, he was probably against what the government was doing in Vietnam, so he exposed them in order to let the public know like the wrongdoings of the government.
Do the people have a right to know what their government is doing? Santos.
So just like a few years ago with Edward Snowden, the same thing happened.
Yes, it did.
So the people should have the right,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Who are we talking to?
Similarly to what Kat was saying, David and I talked about how it justified Bolsonaro just for the fact that it's justified because, you know, the people do research on what's going on, so they have proper information to decide if they want to do something or not to do something, or if they want to support something and not support something. But it's also not just for the fact that sometimes ignorance is bliss. You know, it's better sometimes it's better not to know certain things because it'll just cause more tension and more drama in society or in just the
Ignorance was bliss until the 10 offensive. We're winning the war, we're winning the war, we're winning the war. Holy shit, no, we're not. Ray, you got a point?
Me?
Yeah.
I agree that the people.
Good point.
I agree that I take Ellsworth's side. The people do deserve to know, just because of how important and how controversial like that our actions in Vietnam were at this time. Like all the controversy that was going on and all like the propaganda and media just being geared toward the Vietnam War. So
Okay.
or our actions just in Vietnam. So I believe that he was justified in it.
Okay. Just an add?
to add on, at the end of the day, it's the people that suffer, which gives it a big reason.
They're our government. We don't. What is the government except an extension of us? So what has the government always done, though, to people like this at times of war? I don't know. Ask Eugene Debs. And all Eugene Debs did was criticize the government, criticize the draft, and tell people not to sign up for the draft. And he went to jail for violating the Espionage and Sedition Acts. How do they want to treat Ellsberg? Call the National Guard. They take care of these problems. So the papers themselves, the documents are proving that the government, LBJ's administration, had lied to Congress, had lied to the people about what was actually happening in Vietnam. If you guys want, I can bring the papers tomorrow. I have them all in book form. I'm using them to write my paper on Vietnam right now. It's like about this long. The book is very long. And the Pentagon papers are showing that no, we weren't responding to escalation by North Vietnam. We were the ones escalating. And it was the American government who was actively taking a path that led away from peace and towards more conflict. And LBJ and company had lied to Congress, so Congress kept approving what they needed, and lied to the American people. And no, there never was any light at the end of the tunnel. The documents proved that by 1965, when I talked about Americanization on Monday, as we began bombing North Vietnam, sending tens of thousands of troops into Vietnam, by 1965, at the very least, but definitely by 1966, the real objective in Vietnam was to save face, to save embarrassment, not to defeat communism. Was to avoid a humiliating defeat. By 1966, it is obvious to the Johnson administration that you're not going to win in Vietnam. And yet we keep on escalating more and more and more and more troops. Because by then, it's not a. By 1966, we're like, yeah, we're not stopping communism here. We're just delaying the inevitable. And we're also like, hey, whatever. It's just Vietnam. And then 35,000 more people die. Just in an attempt to avoid a humiliating defeat in the eyes of the world. So what this does to public opinion is even more terrible. The fact that the Nixon administration is actively trying to keep them from publishing it makes them look even worse. There's a very important court case, New York Times versus the United States, in which the Nixon administration sues the New York Times to stop them from publishing this stuff. And the Supreme Court says, nope, you can't. You cannot stop them because in America we have the freedom of the press, and they can publish whatever the hell they want. Sorry, government. So this is a good end point for us in this year, right, of quieting dissent during wartime, and quieting dissent during wartime, and quieting dissent during wartime, and then finally a victory. Finally a victory for the American people to express discontent via the press during wartime. Eugene Debs is still in jail, like, man, what the hell?
Do you think the conflict of American communism was it intended to actually be like that, or was it just a label for America trying to keep their support?
Good question. Good question. I think that in general, the Cold War is legitimate. That we are trying actively to stop communism from spreading in places where it matters. But by the 1960s, it gets murky. It gets murky because of Vietnam. Because this critique of containment that Walt Lippmann gave us on day one of this unit is coming true. That if you try to stop communism everywhere it starts to drip and drop and bleed, like you're going to be all over the world fighting battles you can't win. And again, once you get into this idea of just supporting people because they are not communist, you end up supporting a bunch of really terrible people, which we'll talk more about in class tomorrow, in places like Afghanistan and Iran and elsewhere. So by 1973, Nixon's national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, I'd teach a whole 5-hour class on him if we had time, we don't, promises America that peace is at hand. What does that sound like?
Light at the end of the tunnel.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. He's like, 1972, guys, don't worry, the war is about this close from over. We're not going to win, but we're going to be out of Vietnam shortly. And then, boom, right after that, the North Vietnamese army fully invades the South, and the war ramps back up again. It's all sorts of terrible. And the U.S. responds with its most massive bombing campaign in North Vietnam to date. Guys, it's almost over. No, it's not. Guys, there's light in the tunnel. No, there's not. We're almost out. No, we're not. But 1973, we have signed a ceasefire, stopping the conflict at least temporarily. The three sides have all agreed to stop fighting right now. We're done. The U.S. agrees. The South Vietnamese government agrees. The North Vietnamese agree. The South Vietnamese at this point, I think, are on their 10th leader, their 10th government since we first got involved. And it goes like coup after coup after coup after coup. A good South Vietnamese government during the Vietnam War lasts 9 to 12 months. An average South Vietnamese government during the Vietnam conflict lasts 3 to 6 months until they get overthrown by somebody else, by somebody else, by somebody else, because they're building their entire government on quicksand. The ceasefire is signed in 1973. Nixon gets in front of the American people and says, yes, we have achieved it, guys. We've achieved it. We've done it. Like I promised you, peace with honor. And the Cambodians are like, what honor? And the Laotians are like, what honor? And the Americans that died in the 3 years since he took office are like, what honor? The conditions of the ceasefire of the ending of conflict are as follows. 1, U.S. removes all their troops basically immediately. If you win a war, do you have to remove all your troops immediately? Second condition, North Vietnam gets to leave whatever troops they have in South Vietnam in South Vietnam. Does that look at all these two conditions? Can the U.S. say they won this war? No. Can the U.S. say they achieved their version of peace? No. Check, check. Third condition, as soon as the U.S. is gone, North Vietnam can go about whatever they were doing and resume the war as they see fit. The U.S. is basically like, time out, time out, time out, pause. All right, we got to go. We're out. You guys can go about your business as soon as we're gone, but let us get out of here real quick. So South Vietnam, like, hey, good luck. It's been real. It's been really cool being here for the last, 20 years. Peace. And then we're gone. Don't call, actually. Numbers blocked. We create no provision or no accounting for how to get American prisoners of war or missing in action soldiers home. Instead, basically just leave them in Vietnam. People like John McCain, who recently died, a Republican senator from Arizona, was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for, I think, 9 years. 9 years as a prisoner of war. And the last American troops are out of South Vietnam by March, the end of March in 1973. All right, 9 days from today. 46th anniversary will be next Friday. By 1975, the North Vietnamese have fully defeated South Vietnam and unified the country under the name Vietnam. So it takes about another year and a half. The South Vietnamese they still have U.S. resources, U.S. supplies, U.S. stuff. About a year and a half later, it's all done. The North Vietnamese march into Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, and as a final exclamation point to the conflict, they rename Saigon Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh is, of course, dead by now, but in honor of the guy that first started this conflict to reunite Vietnam under communism, they renamed the capital of South Vietnam Ho Chi Minh City. It's back to being called Saigon today, but just so you guys know. Just make sure you're awake. The South Vietnamese attempt desperately to flee the country, knowing that they're the ones fighting against communism all this time, and now communism is here. They flee to neighboring Laos, neighboring Cambodia. They create humanitarian crises in both places. We see in Cambodia in the next 15, 20 years a terrible genocide and dictatorship called the Khmer Rouge, which is definitely worth diving into on another time. Another example of the U.S. supporting an administration because it's opposed to communism, and then they just turned out to kill all their people in Cambodia. As all of these people flee the chaos of Vietnam and go find chaos elsewhere. It's a really, really sad story of Southeast Asia and what the U.S. walks away from. As we see here, they're on buses, on rickshaws, with donkeys and cars, and trying to get the heck out of Vietnam. Some of them successfully, some of them not. And the U.S. is gone. The war is over. Containment as a strategy has lost. And Vietnam is fully communism. It will be for the next 12 years, and then it will be communism. I haven't fought that really. The impact of the war is more importantly, though. 26th Amendment is ratified, giving 18-year-olds the right to vote. Those college protests work. This theory of if you're going to send us to war, at least give us a say in the matter. To this point, most states decided the age on voting, and most states had it at 21. So we dropped the voting age to 18, which reflects this idea by the young people that, hey, if you're going to make us fight a war, at least let us have a say in who sends us there. After the war, Nixon abolishes the draft. One of the big critiques that people are protesting against is the fact that people are being drafted to fight in a war they don't agree with. Our president famously gets out of the draft currently. Our current president got out of the draft by saying he had bone spurs in his feet. He got a medical exemption. If you can pay for a doctor to say you've got a problem with you, then you can avoid the draft. So the draft indiscriminately targets people of color and poor people. We have not had a draft since. We've had an all-volunteer military since Vietnam. It's not to say we wouldn't have a draft if we needed it again, if we had World War III broke out tomorrow. You guys would all get drafted in about a year and a half. So good luck. Fortunately, I'm too... Yeah, you could. Not Luis. Luis can't pick up the gun. We've got to wait more. So, also important, very important politically, the War Powers Act. What was the thing that gave Johnson unlimited power in Vietnam? What gave Johnson unlimited power in Vietnam from Monday? Don't talk about it. What is it called?
Something resolution.
Yes, the something resolution. That's good. It's in your notes. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution that Congress gives that grants LBJ the power to conduct the war however he wants. They take that back with the War Powers Act in 1973. This is the beginning of the sentence. This is the end of the sentence. So Congress realizes that giving a president unlimited power to conduct war however he wants, maybe that backfired. Maybe that wasn't the best of ideas. Now the president has to tell Congress within 48 hours of sending the military somewhere. They have a 2-day window to let Congress know. And they have a 90-day window to get congressional approval to leave troops somewhere in the world. So it restricts some of what the president can do militarily. This will be helpful for you guys next year in the Congress versus presidency discussion of Unit 2. But one of the bigger problems is this big disregard for veterans. The veterans from Vietnam come back and are treated terribly. They're called baby killers. Right? Because all the stuff that's in the news about Vietnam is all negative stuff. The My Lai massacre. Right? The way we're burning villages. The way we're treating innocent people. Did most of the veterans kill innocent people? No. No. Did even a good chunk of them do that? No. But they're coming back from a war that is incredibly unpopular. When I was in my Vietnam War seminar just this past summer, one night we had a panel, a dinner discussion with 5 or 6 Vietnam veterans. And one of the guys is obviously still very, very bitter. Right? The war sucks for these people when they come back and they're treated like just terrible. And the worst part is most of them were drafted. They had no choice. And the guy said we landed in San Francisco, of course a very liberal, protest-heavy city. We landed in San Francisco. We walked to the airport. People had signs. People were spitting on them. People were calling them all sorts of terrible, offensive names, right? Just because they did what they saw as their civic duty and did what their country asked. A sad legacy of the war. This issue lingers as well of the prisoners of war not coming back. And the costs are also important. First cost, 3 million dead Vietnamese people. And that's just from the American portion of the war post-Geneva Conference of 1954. 3 million dead people to save America from embarrassment. No, because only 58,000 Americans are killed. 300,000 Americans are wounded, so the American cost is much less than the Vietnamese cost. A good chunk of this 3 million is civilian as well. The Great Society, of course, gets underfunded because you can't have guns and butter. You can't pay for the military and domestic social help programs at the same time. So as the war costs $150 billion, that money comes from somewhere. That somewhere in general are social welfare programs. Programs to help people. But the biggest cost is our trust in our governments, our confidence in our country, our morale as being the good country, our belief that we're the good guy, that's gone. Our belief that we are the symbol of good in the world, gone. Our belief that we can't lose a war because we're America, gone. And as Ho Chi Minh says at the very beginning of the war, if we have to fight, we'll fight. You will kill 10 of our men, we will kill 1 of yours, and in the end it will be you who gets tired of it. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a lovely day.